Welcome to the Sound of Ideas Reporters Roundtable from IdeaStream Public Media. I'm Mike McIntyre. Thank you so much for joining us. If you're worried about what's got everyone talking this week, it's not the best time to step back and take a deep breath, especially if you're outdoors. Air quality continues to be hazardous here and across the Northeast and Midwest, thanks to a plume of smoke from Canadian wildfires. Cleveland City Council promised guardrails as it approved flock surveillance cameras for 6 months amid vocal opposition. AI said there was an active shooter on the University of Akron campus. AI was wrong. While everyone's talking about property taxes, GOP gubernatorial candidate Vivek Ramaswamy talked this week about axing the income tax. And would you vote for permanent daylight saving time? The U.S. House did. Joining me to discuss these and all of the top stories this week from IdeaStream Public Media, criminal justice reporter Matt Richman and education reporter Connor Morris. Hey, guys.
Morning, Mike.
Howdy.
Good to see both of you. Howdy. You said that to me when you walked in the office today. You said howdy. Very good. At IdeaStream's State House News Bureau in Columbus, a woman who only springs forward and never falls back, Chief Karen Kassler. Good morning, sunshine.
Good morning. How are you?
Good to have you with us as well. And you can join us by sending email to soi@ideastream.org. Let's get ready to roundtable. Wildfire smoke from Canada prompted an air quality advisory across Ohio yesterday and much of the Midwest and East Coast, with Northeast Ohio reaching hazardous air quality levels. Health officials urged everyone, but especially those with heart or lung conditions, children, older adults, and pregnant women, to stay indoors. It was surreal yesterday. Visibility is usually 10 miles. It was about a half mile. I could see shapes of the skyline driving into downtown, but not the skyline itself. It felt like the fog from Widow's Bay. I wonder if you guys noticed that yesterday too. To me, it was, I woke up, my wife left first, and she said, it smells like, the whole world is burning out here. And I'm like, it can't be that bad. And I go outside and it was that bad.
Yeah, and it was much worse than the last time because the smoke was, down on the ground level, so you could really feel it when you were trying to walk around.
Yeah, when you say last time, 2023. And we
yes.
had this shroud, and it was kind of eerie and gloomy looking. But yeah, I don't remember smelling it like we have here.
Yeah, it was more up in the atmosphere this time because of the heat dome. As I understand it, it's holding it down to ground level.
Right, great.
Yeah.
It was rather apocalyptic looking, yeah.
It does have everybody talking, and I know our interns. Some of our interns went out. Charlotte Johns and Sonia, but they both went out, and they both went out to take pictures and videos with people. And before they even started that project, everyone was talking about it as they were coming down into the office. So it's a talker, but it's also something that can be very dangerous. And Connor, it's not just the smell. Oh, it smells like smoke out here, but that smoke carries very fine particulate matter that can get into your lungs and even your bloodstream. It presents a real hazard.
Yeah, the air quality index in Cleveland yesterday was like a high of like 604. That's very hazardous. I mean, they recommend you don't really do anything outside, especially, God forbid, exercise or anything like that. It's just not something you should do. As I was leaving my house yesterday morning, I was like, oh, I'll go walk and get a coffee. And I was like, I'm not going to do that. Yeah.
But when you say 600, over 600, usually that scale goes to 500. So literally it sort of went off the charts.
Yeah.
And I think in 2023, the numbers were in the 200s and they were bad. Now we're talking about, nearly triple that.
Yes, exactly. This is the worst the air quality's been in Cleveland within the current record keeping, which I guess goes back to 2000. And yeah, it can trigger asthma attacks, coughing, shortness of breath, chest pain, wheezing, all sorts of breathing problems. And, folks should, if you experience anything like that, you should definitely seek medical attention right away, of course.
Right. And the experts are saying basically the solution to this is pretty simple. The first one, just don't go outside.
Yeah. It's kind of reminiscent of some of the COVID early times in some regards. Wear N95 masks. So not just like a cloth mask. That's not really going to help you out very much. And then if you're indoors, some suggestions of using like air purifiers and things like that. One thing I was looking up, I have a window AC unit, and generally it circulates the air inside your home, so those are generally safe. You don't need to like take them out and close your windows generally, but it was very bad. I mean, I could even smell it inside my apartment, yesterday, so it wasn't great.
And it's down Columbus way too, Karen?
Absolutely. When you said good morning sunshine to me, I should have added smoky sunshine because that's what we're seeing. It's very weird. And I think when you look at the national picture, Ohio is really in the middle of this purple area, which is worse than red when it comes to air quality. So we're getting hit with a lot of it, I think.
We're seeing a lot of response to that by government entities, businesses, et cetera. In Cleveland, City Hall is closed, and outdoor activities not happening.
Yeah, the pools are closed in Cleveland. Outdoor movie nights in Strongsville and North Olmsted are canceled. There's, of course, the 88th First Energy All-American Soapbox Derby. I had to get the full title in there. In Akron, those events are canceled just for today. Looks like they're on for tomorrow at least. But anything that's really taking place outside today is you really need to folks will need to check. The official channels to see if they're actually still on or not, but generally, maybe not.
There are some things that still are. I know the Blazing Paddles River Fest is scheduled for this evening and for tomorrow. This evening, 5 to 9, tomorrow, 8 to 3. It's in the Nautica Waterfront District on the Flats West Bank. That's still going, so there are folks that will do those things. But do check before you go anywhere, because
Exactly.
there could be some cancellation. Question is, when are we going to get some relief?
Looks like tomorrow, I believe, was the latest I saw. I think it was tomorrow morning-ish. And hopefully I got a tennis match tomorrow, so we'll see.
Okay. Yeah, the EPA recommends everyone stay indoors today. The air quality alert remains in effect till midnight tonight, Saturday morning. Hot, stagnant air combined with wildfire smoke is here, and it's coming with winds from the northwest, but apparently those wind directions will start to change, according to the meteorologists, later today and this evening, and the smoke will start to clear. Big improvements with air quality, as you mentioned, tomorrow. Also some rain that might be able to clean the air out a little bit. So sometimes you pray for rain.
Yeah.
And this might be one of those types of times. All right. Other big stories this week. Cleveland has extended its contract with Flock Safety's license plate reader cameras for 6 months after adding new privacy protections. City Council was divided. I think it was 9-6, Matt, was the vote. Usually you don't see that. Usually council kind of hashes things out. You might see a couple of stragglers. This was an interesting thing, and an east-west divide.
Yeah, this is a pretty controversial contract. It's been going on for several months. There was an activist group that has been really pushing the opposition to this contract. And the way these license plate readers work is that they're fixed to light poles around the city, and they take a photograph of every car that passes and then store all those photographs for 30 days at least. And any officer without a search warrant can search for a license plate, and then they can even go further and search for, a certain type of vehicle.
A dent, a bumper sticker.
Yep, can enter like some of those sort of characteristics to find, every camera that vehicle has passed within a certain amount of time. And so it really is a very powerful tool for officers looking for, suspects.
You can see why that would work if you have somebody that committed a crime and you can follow the path of where they were and say, okay, now we have an idea of the vehicle that was involved or where it might have gone. But there also then was this concern, and we talked about this last week too, where it might have been used in either nefarious ways or in ways that maybe the city doesn't want it to be used, to look at whether somebody was checking their immigration status and where they might be, or somebody who might have gone, in some places, might have gone out of state for an abortion when it's illegal in that state, those types of things. And they worry about that. What did the city have to say in terms of the way it's going to try to put guardrails on that?
Yeah, that was one of the interesting things. I mean, they said that they're going to reduce the extension from a year to 6 months and put out an RFP, a request for proposals for a new contract with maybe Flock, maybe another company that runs these license plate readers. And then, one of the really powerful things about this technology and this company is that because they have contracts with so many cities and so many law enforcement agencies, a Cleveland police officer who's looking for a car isn't just limited to where that vehicle traveled within Cleveland. They enter it and can get, a nationwide search for a vehicle. And that here, where there are so many suburbs and where, people cross borders all of the time, it really, it really is helpful tool, and that's what you heard from law enforcement over and over again during these hearings, is that it's become essential to the work that they do. But because it's open that way, where anybody who has a contract with the flock can search search pretty much anybody's cameras, that means that, and that has raised concerns that, for instance, immigration authorities, when they're looking for a vehicle, they enter a license plate and it searches everybody.
Right.
And, Cleveland has said that we're not helping immigration. We're not helping federal immigration enforcement. But just because of the way Flock is set up, immigration was able to do that. So they said that they're going to close off, and it's written into the law. The law enforcement did this a while ago, but now it's written into law where they're closing off searches to outside law enforcement agencies. So nobody, when they're looking for a car, can check Cleveland's cameras.
Okay.
That solves the problem of law enforcement or people who or law enforcement is looking for somebody traveling out of state for reproductive health care. But then that really limits the effectiveness of this tool. Now, if Garfield Heights, if law enforcement in Garfield Heights is looking for a car, it wasn't clearly spelled out how they would see if that car crossed into Cleveland. I assume they would have to call Cleveland Police, and Cleveland Police would enter that license plate for them, but that wasn't really spelled out during all the hearings that I heard.
And I mentioned there was an east-west divide. A lot of the east side council members voted yes for this, except for one. A lot of the west side council members voted no for it. No, the opposite way. I'm sorry, that is the way it was. And so the thing about the east side council members is they say their neighborhood and their constituents are worried about safety, and this is something that would enhance safety.
Yeah, it was really a passionate debate at the last. It was a committee of the whole meeting this week, and there was, the East Side council members said that that their neighborhoods are not going to, they don't want their neighborhoods to just kind of turn away this tool that the chief of police, the public safety director, every police officer who's come in to council said, we need this. We use this in every violent crime investigation. This is an essential tool for us now. And, their view was that, or these council members' view was like, why would we turn this away? We have a lot of violent crime in our neighborhoods. And then, you heard from the West Side council members that, that this, the sort of the privacy implications and the ways that this tool can be used, there are bigger issues than its usefulness. And, Cleveland Police solved crimes before this tool arrived. And if we limit the use, or if the city were to limit the use of this tool, they would continue to use other investigative tools to solve crimes. So, it was many hours of that debate.
Tom sends an email, and he's on the side of no to the Flock cameras. He says the initial primary function of Flock is law enforcement, but inevitably, when combined with AI and data center capacity, these cameras could be used to track our every public behavior for the purpose of adjustment of our social credit score, a system which already exists in China, which determines what liberties each individual can enjoy. That's Tom's concern, shared, I'm sure, by some of those who are opposed to these. And some of those who are opposed to these in Ashland County took action. They vandalized the Flock cameras at multiple locations there. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, there were some cameras were destroyed that were, because these are just sort of sitting on light posts. They're not that hard to find if you are looking for
You know what to
them.
look for, yeah.
Yeah, they're sitting on light posts. They usually have or everyone that I've seen has a little like solar panel underneath it to power it. And this is actually, you've seen online, there is a group, kind of a national group that is, let's say, campaigning or is pushing the idea of when you see them, take them out, destroy them, just sort of in response to the concerns about the surveillance state that these cameras kind of can be a part of.
Yeah.
If they're kind of allowed to proliferate without.
I know that the police chief there said, listen, you're just destroying stuff that you paid for. These are paid for by taxpayers. They're needed by us as police. And by destroying them, you're, essentially just adding to your tab.
Yeah. It doesn't seem to be solving the issue of whether or not these things are going to be here. And there are there was several thousand. Cleveland.com found that in Cuyahoga County there are several thousand of these cameras set up already. So there's no turning it back that way, I guess. I would
Right,
say.
indeed. And again, this was in Ashland County that happened, but certainly something to keep an eye on. Cleveland City Council approved a 3-month moratorium on new standalone data centers while the city updates its zoning rules and policies. Originally, Matt, I thought when you did the reporting, it was a year-long moratorium proposed by council member Charles Slife. Why is it shrunk down to 3 months?
Well, there was some concern as it kind of made its way through council that this would be sort of akin to putting up a sign that they're closed for a business. That if you wait a year, these companies that are trying to build them are going to go somewhere else and build them elsewhere, and that it might
Maybe
be,
that's the idea for some people.
well, yes, but I think particularly Council President Blaine Griffin said he doesn't want to send that message at this point, or he didn't want council sending that message.
So what are they going to do in this 3 months then?
They're going to look at, zoning rules, so regulations for where exactly they can be put, because there's no, with zoning, there are types of uses that are, there's heavy industrial, there's commercial, there's not really a category that these fit into quite right. So what the council member said is that we want to figure out exactly how to set up zoning rules that'll apply well to these kind of these are the really big data centers that are being built to kind of meet the needs of artificial intelligence. That's a pretty new thing. And then, they're going to have to look closely at, for instance, the tax incentives that the city offers to new industries coming to Cleveland. Like, do those apply well to this when it's these giant companies with close to trillions of dollars
Right.
of value? Are we going to be giving them tax breaks on the materials that they purchase to build these things like that will have to be considered. And then there was kind of plans that came out, or a proposal to build one in the Slavic Village neighborhood. And I think a lot of people said, well, this is close to where people live. Do we really want this close to where people live? So that was what led to the pumping of the brakes, to really take a close look at how these things are going to be handled.
It doesn't exist. It doesn't affect existing data centers. So there are those that are built now and won't be impacted by this. I thought it was interesting too that Council Member Tanmay Shaw said, "The city can't get anything done in 3 months, and you're going to tell me in 3 months we're going to figure out how to regulate these things?"
Yeah. That was an interesting point, and it's summer, so we might not see council again until September. And so, the idea was, I think part of it was just a message, to send a message that we're going to try to get this done as quickly as possible. And you companies out there eyeing Cleveland, don't give up on us yet.
Right.
And there's a possibility of extending it for another 3 months or another month, or
All right. If there's a Kalshi bet on this, I'm saying north of 3 months. It's going to be longer than 3 months for sure. Cleveland is moving ahead with plans for designated outdoor refreshment area. It's called Adora. This one actually is indoors in Playhouse Square. It's outdoors only for big events. Adora allows people to buy alcohol from participating businesses, carry them within a designated area. You take your beer out from the bar and walk to the next place or whatever. You can see that in the French Quarter in New Orleans, a whole lot of places. One council member, though, said all of downtown should be Adora, that it shouldn't just be the Playhouse Square area. And tell me a little bit about that. And we've just mentioned his name when it came up to data centers as well. Charles Slife is in the news this week.
Yeah.
energetic councilman.
Yeah, he said the city should, eventually expand the concept to all of downtown. So the idea is like East 4th Street, Progressive Field, Playhouse Square, you kind of a connected area so you can take your drink, all the way through. And I mean, Cleveland's doing anything it can to bring people back downtown, of course. So that's part of this too.
Right now, the Dora for Playhouse Square would be for events like Tri-C Jazz Fest, the Borderlight Festival, future events, Holiday Market on the Plaza, those types of things. The idea of just having open carry of alcohol from East 4th Street to Playhouse Square and around is that it would just become an entire entertainment district. The concern, I think, from law enforcement officials is if it might promote even more alcohol use. You might have even more of the issues that you deal with from you dealt with it in a bar, now you're dealing with it on the corner.
Disorderly conduct and things of that nature, fights, things like that. Of course, I don't know that there's been any real data in Ohio on like the results of crime, increasing or decreasing because of DORAs. The only main one that I'm familiar with is the one in Athens, OU, oh yeah, and it generally seemed to be working out fine for the city there. You generally the cups have to be a specific kind of cup to take with you as you leave out into the street. So there's some accountability regulation ish there.
So could I get a hot nut from Tony's and put it in a cup and walk around with it?
That's a good question, Mike. I mean, you probably just want to just shoot it back
Okay.
immediately, but
And I did not go to OU. I just happen to know a lot about it.
Well, I was just going to bring out, I listened to the debate over this in council, and one of the reasons why they want to do this is because Cleveland gets 6 of these outdoor refreshment area sort of. I don't know what you call them, but they can have 6 of them, and so they already have one on East 4th, and then there'll be this one in Playhouse Square, and then presumably, when the lakefront is ready, they're going to want one there, and then the riverfront, and I mean that would be 4 if you're doing these small scattered ones just in downtown. And so some council members said, well, we're going to probably want one in University Circle, and what about Shaker Square? And so there was concern that they were all going to get eaten up by downtown, and nothing gets council members more on the edge of their seat than the idea that downtown's getting everything. So this was one of those situations again.
Interesting point. Ohio is spending $1 million to recruit and train poll workers in an effort to avoid staffing shortages on Election Day in November. Karen, this happened in the past where they've been short-staffed, and that ends up being longer lines, et cetera. So what will they do now to try to goose up the numbers?
Well, I just wanted to add one thing really quick about the DORAs.
Oh, sure.
There was a study that was done in 2021, and in downtown Columbus reports that 96% of the 25 DORA communities at the time did not report any increase in crime. So there has been some attempt to try to track what happens with those DORAs, and so far, apparently, they've gone really well. So let's turn back to what you actually asked me about, which, of course, is the $1 million grant for poll workers. And this is something that's been happening for a long time, that poll workers, there's been a shortage of them. As we go into big elections like this one, Secretary of State Frank LaRose has issued a directive saying that he wants 15% more poll workers than are technically needed. And this $1 million grant is for all 88 counties, a minimum of $1,000. Counties have to apply for it. And the money can be used for things like it can't be used for payroll, wages, or bonuses for poll workers, which is one of the things that has been cited as a reason why there's been difficulty in recruiting poll workers, because they just don't get paid very much.
So the $1 million comes from where? The state?
Yeah, and again, this is divvied out potentially to all 88 counties here. The money can be used to recruit through advertising, also facility rentals for training activities, and any cost relating to hiring trainers and the printing and reproduction of training material. So it's really targeted toward training as opposed to the actual work that poll workers are doing. But elections officials say, anything helps at this point. They're really struggling to get poll workers, not only because of the pay, but there's also a real concern from some people that there's safety concerns here, and they're worried that their safety could be in danger if they're working the polls because of so many reports of things that could potentially happen. And we've been reassured over and over that nothing like that's going to happen. These are secure places, but poll workers are worried.
Yeah, and you need not just the number of poll workers to staff it, but they're talking about a reserve pool of poll workers, 30% more than you need. Part of the reason for that is there are last-minute cancellations, illnesses. As you mentioned, somebody who might somehow become afraid of what might happen at the polls, so you need to have backups.
Yeah, and you're talking about a population that in many cases is older, and so their availability may change between the time that they get trained and when they actually are there. So 40,000 extra workers are being the goal is to have them trained on top of what's already there. So this is it's a tall order, but poll workers come through. I mean, it's amazing how every single year we get poll workers from both parties who show up and do a great job.
And needle me every time I go to vote. Absolutely. Vivek Ramaswamy, the Republican candidate for governor, said he plans to eliminate the state's capital gains tax, and then that's part of a larger goal to get rid of the whole state income tax. A booming economy will cover any losses experienced by the state, he said. And Karen, we have been talking about property taxes forever. And in fact, I'll mention it in a moment, but we're going to be talking about it at a community tour on Monday evening at the Cleveland Metro Park Zoo. Property taxes. What he's talking about, though, is income taxes.
Well, he has talked about property taxes a little bit, and he was actually asked at this event about property taxes and his idea to roll back property taxes to pre-pandemic levels. And he was asked how is he going to do that while still talking about having better schools. And his answer was a little bit confusing because he talked about in the pre-pandemic times we had better school performance, and so we can somehow roll back property taxes to that. I'm not sure how all of that works, but he's been a lot more clear, I think, on eliminating the state income tax and eliminating the capital gains tax. Capital gains tax is kind of rolled into income tax, so if you eliminate the income tax, I believe you eliminate the capital gains tax as well. But he's talked about both of those things, and his critics have pointed out that especially the capital gains tax repeal would benefit the wealthiest Ohioans. Like 55% of the benefit from rolling back and getting rid of the capital gains tax would benefit people making over $1 million a year in Ohio. And that group, of course, includes Ramaswamy.
Now, he made this while he was getting an endorsement from the Ohio Chamber of Commerce in the election. Not a surprise. I don't think the Chamber has ever endorsed anyone but a Republican.
Well, and when it comes, they have endorsed Democrats in other offices, but when it comes to the office of governor, the first time they endorsed anyone for governor was John Kasich during his first run in 2010. And since then, they have not endorsed anybody but a Republican. So they endorsed Kasich twice, they endorsed DeWine twice, and now they're endorsing Ramaswamy.
All right, I mentioned just a moment ago that we're going to be talking about property taxes, and we're going to be doing that at 6 o'clock Monday night. You can join us for the next stop of the Sound of Ideas community tour. It's at the Cleveland Metro Park Zoo. We'll be talking about all the property taxes that are on people's minds, a panel of folks with various perspectives, some who want to see large-scale reform, others who want to eliminate property taxes, and those who say property taxes are essential to fund parks, schools, libraries, and other vital public services. You are invited, so just go to ideastream.org/community tour to let us know you're coming. We hope to have a big crowd there and a great, robust conversation. We have many more stories to talk about on this week's Reporters Roundtable, including permanent daylight saving time. What is your vote? The U.S. House voted, yeah, we should have that. What do you think? We're going to talk about that in the next segment as well. Now, here's Stephanie Haney with a look at next week on The Sound of Ideas.
Hi there, Mike. Here's what we have coming up next week on The Sound of Ideas. Monday kicks off our IdeaStream Explores Property Taxes week-long series where the entire newsroom is covering property taxes, so we'll preview that for you to start the show. We'll also talk with Ohio State Representative Dave Thomas about what's happening in the state legislature when it comes to property taxes. And we'll hear from IdeaStream's Kabir Bhatia about the leadership shakeup at the Cleveland International Film Festival. On Tuesday, we turn our attention to townships and specifically how property taxes work there in our state. We'll also hear from the author of a book called Something in the Woods Loves You. This is a book about mental health and nature. On Wednesday, we'll bring you our panel conversation on the future of property taxes from our community tour. This is a live event happening at the Cleveland Metro Park Zoo on Monday night at 6 p.m. We'd love to have you there live. If you can't join us, you can catch that conversation on Wednesday on The Sound of Ideas. We'll wrap things up on Thursday looking at the school funding issue when it comes to property taxes, and we'll bring you our latest installment of The Menu. We'll be looking at the 20th anniversary of Constantino's Market operating downtown, and also the closure of Heinen's downtown grocery store, which is happening at the end of July, and what that means for people in the downtown Cleveland area. If you have suggestions for something you'd like us to cover, we would love an email at soi@ideastream.org. Back to you in the studio, Mike.
Thank you, Stephanie, and that's going to be the Sound of Ideas community tour, the stories that you talked about as well on the Sound of Ideas, but also throughout the week in our morning edition and All Things Considered and throughout the midday. We're covering the issue of property taxes. You can also go to our website, ideastream.org, and you'll find all kinds of coverage there as well. And you are back now with the Sound of Ideas Reporters Roundtable with Matt Richmond and Connor Morris, and of course, Karen Kassler as well. And a reminder, we'd love you to take the Sound of Ideas community tour. We'd love you to come to that, but we'd love you to take the quiz, the IdeaStream news quiz, and you can find that right now on our website too at ideastream.org/quiz. A group of Northeast Ohio universities and regional partners will get up to $160 million from the National Science Foundation to help turn research into new products, businesses, and manufacturing jobs. The funding aims to support industries like aerospace, healthcare, and defense. And Connor, when we were having this story by Steve Litt, who covers economic development and art and architecture for us, he was telling us that as he talked to the leaders in the community, including Beju Shaw from Greater Cleveland Partnership, they were just saying this is a huge deal, up to $160 million. Tell me what it's going to do.
Yes, this is from the National Science Foundation's Regional Innovation Engine grants. So again, followed a $1 million planning grant from that same organization in 2023 to kind of organize this in the first spot, and so, yeah, so Case Western Reserve University is going to lead this coalition. It's known as NeoSmart, which includes more than 70 universities, businesses, and organizations across Northeast Ohio. And that's short for Northeast Ohio Strengthening Manufacturing for American Resilience Through Technology. That is a long, that's a
Pretty
long
good
one
job,
for sure.
yeah.
So, of course, this is a bunch of regional universities. The University of Akron, Case Western Reserve University, Lorain County Community College, universities in Cleveland and Kent. And so it's supposed to create or retain 20,000 jobs, train 12,000 workers for in-demand jobs as well. Strengthen domestic supply chains is their pitch. So again, as you mentioned, automotive, aerospace, defense. There's going to be some AI machine learning as well to increase corporate research and development, I guess, too. And then support 1,000 ventures and provide more than 250 seed investments. So, it's a huge deal. We see these things happen sometimes in Northeast Ohio, and folks often are really, there's a lot of people working behind the scenes for these things to happen because, we're a Rust Belt community. We used to have this massive manufacturing base, and a lot of folks are really working hard to try to set us up for what's next. And this has been happening in this region for a long time, of course.
Advanced manufacturing. But what's interesting is that you've got all the universities, that's this brain power.
Yeah.
And you've got all this capacity to manufacture things. And what they're looking for now is to grease that pipeline so that when someone comes up with a great idea at Case or at Akron with polymers or wherever it might be, it then gets that seed money to become something to be built, which employs people to build it.
Yeah, and honestly, one of the biggest things that we hear about, whenever Cleveland City Council or other folks have these conversations, is that there's a lack of skilled workers sometimes for some of these ventures, and so this is really looking at targeting that too.
Okay. Ohio can't enforce its new hemp restrictions against statewide beverage manufacturers while a lawsuit challenging Senate Bill 56 plays out, and that's for specific manufacturers who have sued the state. According to a federal judge, the law likely gives businesses an unfair advantage by making it harder for out-of-state companies to compete in Ohio. And Karen, we talked a little bit about this before, but now the judge has extended this. Tell us more about his decision to block this and where it stands with hemp regulation in Ohio.
Well, this is for 10 businesses, 10 specific businesses that challenged the law. This was Senate Bill 56 that made changes on THC beverages as well as the state's legalized recreational marijuana program. But they specifically said that this was making it harder, like you said, for out-of-state companies to compete in Ohio. And so this specifically relates to these 10 companies that will be allowed to sell these products, these THC beverages, until a later time period. That includes Saucy Brew Works in Ohio City. But other companies, other places don't have that. It's only these 10. So that's an important distinction here.
And will we see then through these court cases, they are affecting just the ones who were plaintiffs in it, but you would think that the outcome of those would then possibly apply to whether the state can continue with its restrictive law.
Yeah, and I think that's the argument that's being made here. And my State House News Bureau colleague, Sarah Donaldson, is going to be following up on this today, talking to some folks about this whole patchwork that now exists here, where you've got these 10 companies that can sell, or at least the state can't take action against them for selling, and then these other companies that can't. So that's been, I think, the argument all along is, do these rulings apply to all of the different places that are selling these THC beverages? Now, the state has been saying that this is about public health, that really they want to regulate these THC beverages like they regulate marijuana. In Ohio, marijuana has to be produced in Ohio. It's tested in Ohio, whereas these THC beverages can come in from out of state, and the state says that that's just not safe. Meanwhile, these companies, these breweries are saying these are really popular. People are enjoying these seltzers, these THC-infused beverages, and we should be be able to keep selling them.
And it's not just that the beverages are coming in from out of state, it's the ingredients that are coming in. It's the THC or those types of things. And they may be manufactured here, but the ingredients coming from out of state then presents a problem with this particular law. Really interesting to follow, and I'm certain that we'll be doing that. According to a state review, Cuyahoga County jail staff members failed to start CPR immediately after discovering Jennifer Wade unresponsive in her cell before she died in 2025. Inspectors are ordering the county to improve its emergency response. And this was an investigation, Matt, that at first they said things were done properly. It was reopened after the Marshall Project did stories that showed video in which this person was essentially ignored while she was in duress.
Yeah, that video did not initially go to state investigators, and so that's why they reopened it. And then, yes, she was left unresponsive in her cell for hours, and then it took another 20 minutes after a medical emergency was sort of called for a nurse to arrive and to start CPR. And at that point, apparently her body had already become cold to the touch.
So now that they've made that determination, where do we stand? Does the county take that information and say we've changed our procedures?
That's a very good question there. It wasn't entirely clear to me. I think, one of the big issues is, will corrections officers be required to start CPR immediately in a circumstance like this? And what they found, or what kind of this investigation showed, is that only 3 of the 12 corrections officers who responded were trained on a CPR initially. There were then, they got the number up to 12, but the policy is that, you call for medical assistance, and there are nurses from Metro Health who are in the jail. You call for medical assistance and then wait for them to arrive. And so, the state said, according to the Marshall Project reporting, that once a scene is secured, whoever is properly trained should be giving the medical training. So it'll be interesting to see where the county comes down on this.
And also where CPR is required, because I thought at one point it was you have to give immediate CPR, but then there was a directive or a message from the county that says only off of property, outside of the property, which made no sense to me. But
yeah,
I don't understand exactly what their procedures are, and I suppose that this ruling will perhaps give us a little closer look at what kind of reform there might be.
Yeah, and I mean, I think, from the county's perspective so far, and from the union's perspective, is that's why Metro Health is in the jail. They're there to come and provide the medical care, not our corrections officers.
All right. And a development in another case involving another death of an inmate at Cuyahoga County Jail. 3 Metro Health police officers and a county sheriff's deputy will not face criminal charges in the May 2025 death of 39-year-old Tasha Grant. So what happened in that circumstance, and why are they not going to face any kind of criminal sanction as a result?
Yeah, this was a really awful case. A woman was brought to Metro Health, was under some pretty serious stress, and was fighting with the medical staff and with the officers who were there. Eventually, they got her up on the bed and restrained her by cuffing her, and she was a double amputee, so didn't have any legs. And while she was restrained, she could be heard on the video saying repeatedly that she couldn't breathe. Once they got her back up on the bed, restrained her, they administered some sort of medication, gave her a shot, and that sedated her, and then she went into cardiac arrest after that and died.
But there are no charges on that. There wasn't criminal culpability. The family is still pursuing a civil lawsuit in regards to her death.
Yeah, there's I'm not sure if it's in federal court or in county court, but yeah, there is a civil case against both the officers who were there and the Metro Health medical staff.
And Metro Health issued a statement in which they said they're grateful for the grand jury's thorough review, but also noted that it doesn't diminish the profound loss at the center of the case. They said Tasha Grant was well known to many members of the Metro Health family, meant a great deal to those who cared for her. So that's their statement as well. All right. Planned Parenthood of Southwest Ohio is suing the Ohio Department of Health, saying it has delayed approving the ownership transfer of a Dayton abortion clinic. And Karen, How long has this been ongoing, and unusual to see something like this prompt a lawsuit?
Yeah, this has been going on for quite a while. And what the allegation here is from Planned Parenthood of Southwest Ohio is that the Department of Health is dragging its feet on processing some paperwork here. And so they're having to use the license of the previous owner of the clinic. He's having to keep his license active. Dr. Martin Haskell is his name. And they're saying that, frankly, this is just ODH is not doing their job. And so they've gone on with this for a while. I think the first lawsuit was filed in 2021. And so now they're saying it's time to resolve this and move forward. And they want not only ODH to do their job, as they worded it, and process the paperwork, but they also want ODH to be held in contempt of court for making them wait this long.
They've said the previous owner has to maintain his licensure so that it can stay open, that there's all kinds of hardship that's caused by this.
Yeah, and a lot of abortion providers will say this is the kind of thing that they faced as Ohio continues to kind of chip away at abortion rights in Ohio, which has been happening over the years. Of course, that we had in 2023 this constitutional amendment the voters approved that guaranteed access to reproductive treatment as well as abortion. And so that's another claim I think that's part of this, is that this is really going against that constitutional amendment and unconstitutionally limiting people's access, because I think this is the only clinic that's in the Dayton area.
Okay. I want to read an email from Sean and in its entirety, and then I want to go back and hopefully set the record straight. Sean says, was it really necessary for the host to make a comment about poll workers needling him to make it sound like we are annoying just for doing our jobs? I guarantee he's one of the men who gets all huffy-puffy because we bother them to verify their name and address, which is required by law, so excuse us for doing our job. Maybe you should spend a whole day, 5 a.m. to 8 p.m. or later, dealing with nasty, aggressive people like himself while ensuring our elections are properly run. Sean, let me say what I meant by needling is these are my neighbors, and they needle me like, hey, Mr. Sound of Ideas, where's your microphone? It's like that kind of thing. When I say needling, I mean literally they're just teasing and friends, and it's not a situation where I'm huffy and puffy. I respect the poll workers. I'm glad they do what they do, and I vote in person at the same place, I think, for the last 30 years or so. So that's what I meant by that. I also love the bake sale that's outside in the front with the with the PTA. All right. Thanks, Sean. Appreciate that. Hope we cleared that up for you. Plans for a drop-in center for homeless youth in Ohio City are still on hold. An appeals court sent a lawsuit filed by neighbors back to a lower court for further review, keeping the project in legal limbo. And Connor, there's all kinds of different legal machinations here, but basically a drop-in center for homeless youth, it's necessary. Neighbors even agree. They just don't want it in their neighborhood, so they filed suit. So where do we stand with that now?
Yeah, so this drop-in center, it's just meant to provide support services, food, clothing, showers, a place to kind of hang out and respite from the street, but also help getting a job, finding housing. Ultimately, this is a hope that this is a window out of homelessness. And so this has been planned since 2022, and it's been trapped in legal limbo basically ever since neighbors filed a lawsuit saying the city should not have given these offices. This is Lutheran Metropolitan Ministry, as a nonprofit. They've got an office space on Franklin Avenue in Ohio City. It's a residential neighborhood. They've had these offices there for a long time, but they want to turn it into the drop-in center. And the variances from city zoning code that they got are basically at the very core of this issue. The neighbors say this is going to potentially cause issues with crime and trash and noise in our residential neighborhood. We don't want that. Folks are accusing these neighbors, a couple of them of who have filed this lawsuit, of NIMBYism, essentially, so not in my backyardism. And folks say, hey, there are actually other neighbors that say we do support this, so it's been a really contentious issue for sure. The appeals court, it's complicated, but they basically said the judge did not use the proper legal review for part of his decision, so we're going to send it back to him. He'd already said these variances shouldn't have been granted.
So it just stretches it out a little bit longer.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. And we're going to talk about Vinton County. 16 children were found living in deplorable conditions in a tiny home in the village of Hamden near Wellston. Vinton County is in East Ohio. State is giving a local child welfare agency $1 million to help cover their care and medical needs as an investigation continues. And Karen, this is one of those things everybody across the state have been talking about. How did the state determine that the agency needed this $1 million of funding for this tragedy?
Well, this has become a national story because it's just, 16 kids rescued from a home that authorities called deplorable and filthy. It's a terrible situation for those kids. Their parents and grandparents have now been charged with child endangerment. But the $1 million comes from a panel of lawmakers called the State Controlling Board, which approves emergency spending that comes outside of the budget. And the Children's Services entity that serves that area had come to the state saying that their caseload doubled when they took custody of these kids. And so they just did not have the money to help these children because some of them were hospitalized. 2 of them were near death when they were taken from this house. So there's a lot of extra money needed to try to figure out how to help these kids medically as well as to find out what's going to happen to them next. And I think it really does show how close to the edge a lot of counties do operate, especially when you start talking about Appalachian Ohio counties, where there's just not a whole lot of money and something like this happens and it really can just burn through all the money that the county has.
Those children range from 17 months to 18 years old.
Yeah. And one other thing here, too, the grandfather who had been charged with child endangerment was actually released on a bond from jail because he needed medical treatment. And the county said if he stayed in jail, the county would have to pay for that. And there wasn't the money to do that. So it really does show that some of these counties are in difficult situations and still facing terrible situations like this one.
Okay. An artificial intelligence-powered crime app falsely reported an active shooter at the University of Akron on Tuesday. Akron police confirmed there was no shooting. Thankfully, the false report didn't induce panic. And I've heard this happening more and more, Matt, where somebody might get from this, in this case, Crime Radar app, and then put it out on their social media, and then everyone's talking about an active shooter in a place where nothing happens. What's going on?
Yeah, so there are places, so, the police you can get calls over the air. You can hear officers being sent to calls to respond to calls for a service. And there's something online called Broadcastify where you can get a whole bunch of different departments' radio signals and hear what's going on. And so this app is kind of sifting through that and just pulling information off of those feeds and sending it out saying officers are going to this or that call for service without, it's artificial intelligence. So it's not real good at interpreting whether this is a confirmed shooting, whether, what they're responding to actually happened. And
Kind of important.
Yeah. And so, this is heartening as because it's kind of what the reporters do very often.
Right.
Is take what's going on over the air to officers and checking it out, see if it actually happened.
Yeah, we make a phone call on
Yes.
that or go to the place instead of just say, hey, this just happened. And so that's been happening, and it's been in a number of places in Ohio and I think across the country as well. In the University of Akron, the police said that it didn't induce, people didn't call in and say they'd heard it and there was some problems, but you can imagine the kind of panic something like that might induce.
Yeah, I think back in late 2025 it was, but there was something in Texas where it was a potential school shooting, like a elementary or high school
Right.
shooting, and that got a much larger response, closer to the panic. And one of the concerns that an app like this is going to lead to is that, and this has been going on for years, the police have considered encrypting their communications. So, just members of the public can't listen in. And so there is some concern that, these sorts of incidents are going to lead to kind of the loss of access to this scanner traffic.
And until that happens, what police are advising is what you just said reporters do, which is don't just throw stuff out there. Be cautious about the source of the material, and be mindful that the information may not be correct. It could be inaccurate. So let's just not amplify.
Right. And if you wait around for a few minutes, you'll hear that call get closed by an officer. Well, they'll say, I checked it out. It was false alarm.
Right, exactly. Ohio welcomed more than 200 million visitors in 2025, who spent nearly $60 billion across the state, more than the year before. Karen, it's good to see progress, and I've seen it every year since the pandemic. How do we compare this year to previous years? Pretty good one.
Not bad. Up about a little over 1% from last year, but up a significant amount from, say, 2019. 245 million visitors. That includes people coming in from out of state as well as people in state going to do tourism stuff in Ohio. And so the tourism department, the Ohio Tourism Department says, hey, this is a great thing. This is generating a lot of economic activity, $58 billion generated in terms of tourism last year alone. And now they said that they've got the marketing not only to just go after markets that people can drive to Ohio from, but also with new flights coming out of Cleveland and Columbus and other places. Those open up new markets to people so that Ohio Tourism can tell people in those markets that have new flights to Ohio that, hey, Ohio is someplace to consider coming to visit.
All right. And it might be real sunny late at night in Ohio if we have daylight saving time become permanent. The U.S. House of Representatives voted to make that so. The bill now heads to the Senate. President Trump said he'd sign it. Still much debate about whether permanent daylight saving time, permanent standard time, or the current method of switching clocks in the spring and fall is the right move. And we have Dave sending in an email saying there is no reason to make it permanent. If everybody really wants this change, the time that people start work, that would have the same effect, and noon could still be when the sun is at its highest, like Arizona does. He goes on and on about that, and there's a number of other thoughts. I wanted to find out from you all, do you have a vote? So here's the question. If you have permanent daylight saving time, it's going to be dark in the morning when kids go to school and when you get up and go places. If you have permanent standard time, it's going to be a little darker earlier if you wanted to get in some activity after work. Matt?
Yeah, I have no interest in trying to get my 6-year-old up and out the door and to school when it's still dark
So
at 9 in
standard
the
time.
morning. Standard time in the winter.
What about fall back and spring forward? Would you rather just have
Fine
one
with
time?
it. I know.
He's fine with it, okay.
I like the change. I think it's exciting to get the late light in the summer.
It
Connor?
feels like such a ripoff to lose an hour, basically, because of this stuff. So I'm in favor of whatever does not cause us to constantly be changing back and forth.
Okay, so one or the other.
Yeah.
All right, Karen?
I love falling back, so let's just do that all the time.
Right, I thought you were only...
I love falling over.
All right, fair enough. I thought you were always a spring forward person, but that's okay. It is all for today, and we'd love to hear your thoughts too. I know there's some folks sending me emails. We can't get to those today, but I look at all of them, so love to hear your thought on daylight saving time. And that's all for today. My thanks to Karen, Matt, and Connor. Appreciate all of you.
Oh, and real quick, if I could, happy birthday to my mother, who I believe is listening in.
Yes, happy birthday to Mom. Awesome. All right, look out Monday on our website for insights from our art and architecture critic, Steve Litt, on the proposal from the arts collective Mischief to erect 250 bronze and granite sculptures representing everyday Americans on prime lakefront real estate in Cleveland. It's privately funded, it's expected to cost tens of millions of dollars, and is now before the Cleveland Planning Commission. Steve has a lot of questions. You can look for that Monday on ideastream.org. And Monday marks the beginning of our newsroom-wide project, IdeaStream Explores Property Taxes, a full week of content focused on property taxes. We have been attending listening sessions at libraries in the region to hear what's on your mind as the midterms near, and many of you said property taxes. We listened. On the Sound of Ideas Monday at 9, Stephanie Haney will talk with State Representative Dave Thomas, who's been advocating for property tax reform at the State House. And remember, at 6 Monday evening, join us for the next stop of the Sound of Ideas community tour at the Cleveland Metro Park Zoo. We'll be talking with a panel of individuals who have various opinions on how to address property taxes and fund vital public services. Go to ideastream.org/community tour to register. If you miss any part of today's show, you can hear a rebroadcast tonight at 9 on 89.7 WKSU. Find it on any podcast app and on the IdeaStream Public Media YouTube page, and you can watch the television version tonight at 5 on WVIZ PBS. I'm Mike McIntyre. Thanks for listening and watching. Stay safe.